Well, I am absolutely blown away and excited about, let's see if we can show you these here. These two books written by Doug Stewart. This is the traditional side-by-side. So this is everything you want to know about the true upland experience with vintage double shotguns. And is what has I wouldn't say kindled because I've always enjoyed it. I took a year off and this year I was working on some houses and had the headphones on and the podcast going from the Birdshot. And this fella, Doug Stewart, was on and talking about square loads, upland hunting with these classic vintage shotguns. So what do I do as Yancey Perkins? I'll tell you exactly what I do. I dove right in, reached out to the fella, and ordered two of his books. He has these two books, part 1 and part 2. And if you're going to dive into it yourself, just get them both. They're easy read. You're going to learn. I have a high school education from Florida. Nothing bad about Florida. But I never read books. I'm not a reader. I will read, books that can, help you learn things, educational style books, and this is what these are, and they're easy to read. And if I'm saying that, then I highly recommend you grab it. You can absorb the information, but get both books because you'll just go right from one into the second one. And the way I'll be doing this is, I read through it. I'll read through them throughout the year here. And then what I did is I found that on Spotify, I can do the Bird podcast and type in Doug's name, and it pulls up about 4 or 5 that he's been on. And I've just been listening to those in my ears while I'm working. And I have learned that the more I listen to it, the more I learn something new. The reason for all, and I'm going to put these on, I've got, my eyes are burning from the hay that they're doing. I've become somewhat allergic to it. This springtime always gets me. You can hear it in my nose. I'm a little nasally, but that's okay. So we're going to kick back and talk about these books, not in depth, but just in referencing, a story. So this podcast is going to be the Stevens that could. And it's a tribute to my 20 gauge first double vintage shotgun that I ever purchased. I bought it in Victor, Idaho from a fella there. And he's a gunsmith, and he's currently working on my 12 gauge that hopefully I can salvage. But my 20 gauge, as you'll learn, I completely destroyed. What got me excited about these books was I was listening to the podcast, and out of nowhere I realized when Doug was speaking that, I might have been using more modern ammo, and I probably shouldn't have. And with this upland gun that I had, because I have completely destroyed it past the point of any return, blew up the stock, we don't want to go into it. So what I want to do is try to save anybody that's getting into the upland game to dive into Doug stuff before you get too carried away with vintage doubles. And it'll also turn on an understanding to these incredible 100+ year side-by-sides for upland hunting. Now this guy is dedicated to the upland lifestyle with these guns. It's not the range, skeet shooting, trap shooting, things like that, and he'll make it very clear. But his is about being with a dog, family, friends, the experience. And that's what Flannel Moments is all about, is these incredible stories. This first session we're going to be talking about, as I make these videos and I make these podcasts and have people on sharing their stories, will probably be related to the uplands. And we'll dive into also, people that are into the fishing or the hiking, or just, family members that, enjoy the cooking or the outdoor cooking, or, the creating. Some people are writers, and they like to just get out in the cabin and have this cabin culture and this incredible beauty for the outdoors within themselves, whatever it is. And that's what we're going to do here. Today, we're going to dive into the Stevens. I call it the Stevens that could because the list is pretty large. I shot everything with it. It's a 20 gauge. And when I say I used it, it was my new outdoor activity that I got involved into, was learning about upland hunting with a dog. So the gun, 20 gauge, but prior to getting the gun, I realized I needed a dog, so I went and got my first companion for the outdoors, which was, I needed it to be a fishing companion because I was guiding fishing, fly fishing specifically in Wyoming, and be able to become a bird, turn both the dog and I into bird hunters or upland hunters, which then led into goose and ducks and waterfowl. So I went with a versatile breed, which was a Griffon. So I had a keen eye for the people call them the ugly dogs. They are by far from ugly. They're adorable, but they're not the sleek, hunting, pointing dogs that everybody sees. Her name was Bliss, and I got her. She was about this big, and she lived with me every day, and she was perfect for the boat when we were guiding fishing. And the kids, the families, the moms, the dads, they all loved having the dog on the boat. And so we just took her with us everywhere. When I say us, I mean myself and my clients. And at this point, I was doing summers in Wyoming and winters in Florida, guiding fishing. So I'd go from tarpon bonefish permit to, coming out to Wyoming and doing the trout. And I would camp during the summer, live in my truck, things like that, as an absolute focused trout bum would do with their dog. And Bliss and I became just inseparable. Inseparable. Maybe too much, because she definitely had some issues with the separation anxiety. She would just go bananas. So this dog and I, and this Stevens 20 gauge, and I can't tell you a whole lot about it because I really didn't know all about it, other than buy 20 gauge ammo, go out in the woods and learn about grouse. And specifically blue grouse for myself. I learned that I could make my way to the top of the hills to find blue grouse, and as I was going up, I would see roughies along the way. Rough grouse, for those who don't know. And I can remember Bliss, this beautiful dog. I got to a spot where there was like a rock cropping on the side of a hill that was probably 12 feet, but I could climb up part of it, and so I climbed up with this. She's probably this big now, still a young puppy, and I pitched her up to the next level where it was flat, and then I realized I couldn't get up there. So, this is something I learned, from now on, make sure you can get up first before you put your dog up there. Well, I put Bliss up there, and I had, I even threw the gun up there too. So I have the gun up there, the dog, and I have this just cliff of a rock shelf, and I'm not a rock climber. And there was a brief moment I just had to stop and assess the situation. And I was able to figure out, because I was kind of cliffed out both sides. I couldn't go just around, but I was able to finally make my way where there was a tree growing out of the side of the rock. And then, I used it, and I finally got up there. Excuse me, my nose itches from all this. And so we got up there and we continued on, playing in the woods and learning about grouse together. Well, this Stevens that I had, again, all I did was get the ammo. I still don't know much about, the pressures and things like that. But with these books, I'm learning, and he has it all in here, what you should use, the pressure, the light pressures. And I'm going to butcher all this stuff because Doug Stewart, is the fellow that has all the knowledge that wrote these books. I'm just sharing after reading the books and listening to the podcast a little bit. So the terminology may not be right. If I do, don't. Hey, listen, just love on each other. That's all we do here. We share. I'm sharing my experiences and my stories. So I'm still going to be learning. It'll take me 7 times reading these books to internalize them. And that's what I'll do. I'll spend all year reading these books and learning and reaching out to people and going from there. So bear with me. The reason for that quick disclaimer is because I'm going to be talking about, I believe it was, I had to get a lighter pressure or just a lighter ammo, and I probably wouldn't have destroyed the gun because there's this huge recoil factor and there's things that match with guns, there's balance. All of this conversation is in here that I'll be learning about. But I didn't know that. I just saw this cool side-by-side and it kind of really grabbed my attention. And, me being a nostalgic individual, loving antiques, loving, old school things that, people put effort and time and, passion behind it, but not just passion, but it was, nowadays passion is like so short-lived. It's like, I'm into it, give it all you have and you're hammering it out. But back then it was a day-to-day. It wasn't the grind. It was show up, create, put your time into this thing, whether it's just buffing out, certain things, just like, my mother was a quilter and she made everything just super, there was no machines. It was just time. She would be out there. She would just go to it, work on it a bit, go take care of stuff, come back, work on that. So this craftsmanship from a time to where, pre having machines do everything for you. So this is what I'm getting at. So I picked up this gun because it had that feeling. And it just, I'm sure I mounted it all crooked or whatever, but it doesn't matter. When you're going to go learn something, you go and you learn and you start having fun and you enjoy it. And that's what I did for years. And I'd say I picked that gun up probably 12, 15 years, I don't know, somewhere in there is when I got into this program of learning about, having a dog, being in the uplands, enjoying this incredible scenery. And for those of you that are just hearing the podcast, I'm sitting amongst the hillside. I've got pine trees, aspen trees. They're starting to yellow a little bit. You can see the undercover here is starting to turn a little yellow and dry out. We're getting into that fall feeling, which is really keen for me and a lot of people when it comes into that cabin culture and the camp culture, whether it's grouse camp, deer camp, or just camping in general, wall tents and old cast iron cooking pans, this whole incredible feeling. Bring you into that to help you share and understand. Me looking at this 20 gauge Stevens just created that. So I grabbed that, and this led to just the next many years. I ended up even getting to guide, bird hunting. I added that to my fishing season. After that, I would go guide birds and learning about this dog, this Griffon. And past the Griffon, I've had, just so you know, I've had Griffons, I had a Griffon, I had German wire hairs, I had the Italian Spinonis, and now I'm with my poodle pointer. And the poodle pointer was the one I wanted first. And I held off on getting that, and I got all these other breeds, and they're all wonderful. They all have a certain vibe and a feel. The Spinoni was really fun with the gait, the way it kind of snuck in the woods, big, oafy, big head. But the poodle pointer is pretty much everything I needed for the love for the family, the hunt drive, being at home, the water retrieves, just everything. Oddly, she's, the poodle pointer is not my favorite dog to hang out with hunting. She has too much retrieve drive, so she wants to play fetch the whole time. But Bliss, my first dog, the Stevens that could, which I got everything with, those two began this incredible journey into understanding the uplands. And then Doug, with his books and his podcast that he did on, or as a guest on the Bird podcast, or the Bird Shot, and I believe it was Upland because there was a time before I was listening, I think it was Nick, And I believe he had that, and he turned it into the Bird Shot podcast. And because of that, it took me to the next level of understanding the gun more and the ammunition and the square patterns. Now I just want to throw pancakes. For me, that's that nice short shot string, pancake style coming through the air, and working that, and to be better at what I do and have a better understanding. I'm never looking to become an expert gunsmith or an expert in, selling these guns, but what I want to do is be the best that I can as a person that enjoys being out in the woods with the dog, friends, family, with a vintage double gun, and being able to respect what it was built for, understanding what the prime ammunition I should be using for it, for its longevity, out of respect for that and the workers and the craftsmen that built it, and also when I'm out there hunting, and being the most respectful as I can to the whole system. That's the goal of reading these books and getting into it. And that's it. Not to become a full scholar, but just to become a great person that appreciates vintage guns in the vintage world and the outdoor world. And that's all I can really share with you on that. Excuse me for the sniffles. But this Stevens, let me get back to that before we kind of wind things down. We're going to dive into what this gun could do for me. And I like the broad spectrum that I was able to pull off with it. I don't even know if I did it properly as far as if, an understanding of what the true nature of the gun was built for. But it started off where I was in the mountains, looking for and understanding the movements of rough grouse, blue grouse. I believe you guys call it dusky now, but it'll always be a blue grouse to me. Then I took the adventure on to ducks and geese. As the fall went past, we got into November, December, and I was able to do that. And then before the ducks and geese, I also did some sage grouse environments, which were more out in the flats, in the high desert. And then we got into chuckers briefly, Huns. And I didn't do sharptail with this gun particularly. And then that might be it. I've never done the dove thing. So this gun was able to capitalize on this to a high level, and it got my understanding to where it became, I wouldn't say, an obsession, but really deeply ingrained in me, just as high as I did with the fly fishing and the spay rods, and learning how to throw spay lines, chasing steelhead, and then learning to enjoy the environment of the uplands with friends, family, and dogs. There you go, the Stevens that could. And, God bless that first gun for the entry level for me. It was a price point I could handle. And I'm grateful for this. And I look forward to breaking down some of the hunts that I did with that gun in story form for you. Have a beautiful day. Share as much love as you can.